morning and happy Sabbath. We are going to start out our song service this morning with number 92. This is My Father's World.
This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, and the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling clouds I hear him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me never forget that though the rock seems not so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. Where should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let the heavens ring. God reigns, let the earth be glad.
Amen. Our next song will be number 482, Father Lead Me Day by Day.
Father, lead me day by day, ever in thine own sweet way. Teach me to be pure and true. Show me what I ought to do. When in danger, make me brave. Make me know that thou canst save. Keep me safe by thy dear side. Let me in thy love abide. When I'm tempted to do wrong, make me steadfast, wise and strong. And when all alone I stand, shield me with thy mighty hand. May I do the good I know, even loving shall below, and at last go home to thee, evermore thy child to be.
And our opening song for this morning is number 385, Crowning Jewel of Creation. Please stand.
Crowning jewel of creation, blessed and hallowed, sanctified, time and changes all transcending, shared forever, glorified. Blessed Sabbath made for man, gift from the Creator's hand. Sin and sickness, prayer and weeping, seas that call
you for singing. You may be seated.
Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Happy Sabbath. Well, this is a special weekend for the Krugers and Nedleys. It's been planned a long time, and now the day's here. And I went into Carrie's room this morning, and I started crying. I didn't intend to go in there and cry, but I hugged her, and I said, well, I only get to do this 2 more times. I'm going to be here tomorrow morning, I can assure you. But things change, you know. They were tears of joy, but still they were tears. I'd like to mention also, if you'll turn your Bibles to Ephesians chapter 3, and we're going to read just one Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14. And it says there, "For this cause I bow my knees unto the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, of whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened and with might by his Spirit in the inner man." So one thing about this weekend's about families. We have lots of families coming in from all over the United States and friends, and it is about families. When Christ created this earth, he wanted families, Christian families. And this is a special weekend because it's a reuniting of 2 families and forming another Christian family. And we want to pray for them as they start this journey. And so thank you for all being here. And that's all I have to say. But at this time, Daniel Rivera will be coming up and doing a special health nugget this morning.
Hello, church. Happy Sabbath. All right, so today's health nugget is going to be about sunshine. Now, I know it's been really hot outside. I don't know about you, but how many of you guys been outside getting some sun? I know grounds, they're working all day. Mercy. But I know some of us, you guys are working inside in the office, nice AC. How many of you guys have been in that pleasure to be in an office? Yeah. All right. Well, today I'm going to share about sunshine. And I want to read the first text for you guys in Malachi 4:2. Malachi 4:2. And it says, "But to you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wing, and you shall go out and grow fat like a stall-fed calf." And you see, the sun, it shines not on us, but in us. And just like the river that flows past, but doesn't just flow, but pass through us. Thrilling, tingling, vibrating every fiber and cell of the substance of our body, making them glide and sing. It's beautiful how intimately our physiology is entwined and is effective by nature and our environment. We were designed with sensory receptors and internal energy transformers that are cued to the environment. And when it comes to sunshine, its ray of light, it literally shines not on us, but in us. And they penetrate through our skin, and our body interacts with, it's converting those light waves into a chemical called vitamin D, which is incredibly essential to our life. And sunshine is essential to our health. Sun exposure is the main natural source of vitamin D, which is important not only for the bone health, but also for the brain and heart health. And getting enough sunlight can help reduce about 16 different cancers. And like, for example, like pancreatic, lung, prostate, and there's even more. And it decreases the risk of autoimmune disease and affects our blood pressure and reduces risk of heart diseases, strokes, and different types of infectious diseases like tuberculosis. And it improves moods, it prevents dementia, depression, insomnia, joint pain, and just so much more. And it helps us to sleep, age better, and it promotes a healthy gut. But unfortunately, many of us are deficient in vitamin D. And there might be some reasons why. But the question we want to ask ourselves is, are we spending enough time allowing the sun to shine right in us? And many of us may be vitamin D efficiently, but we might be spiritually deficient on that sun. And so, as the text that I read earlier on Malachi 4:2 was about a promised Messiah, which was prophesied about 100 years before he was born in Bethlehem. And he was described as the Son of Righteousness, who would come for the purpose of healing our mind, body, and soul. Like sunshine, Jesus wants to be more than just an object or just like this historical figure, but he designed you to experience the highest level of existence, good health, vibrant energy, and of absolute happiness. By shining not on you, but in you, Christ, the promised one, coming down, penetrating through and making every fiber of your being saved, so that the light shines in you and that you can shine others as well. And so the last verse that I want to close is in Psalms 113, verses 3. In Psalms 113, verses 3, and it says, for the rising of the sun to its going down, the Lord's name is to be praised. And so remember, get some sunlight, guys, and as well as the spiritual sunlight as well. So both sunlight is good, physical and the spiritual aspect of it. So God bless, and then I will give it up to Dr. Nedley.
Thank you, Daniel, for that health nugget. And we're finding out sunlight is even more essential, not just for the vitamin D aspects, which are crucial, but also from the infrared aspects that are even showing greater benefit. As I look at all the benefits of sunlight, I can kind of understand why, if you are separated from God, you might be tempted to worship the sun, and because of all the benefits it does in regards to humanity. But that gets into some of the texts that were part of our week this week, where people have a tendency to worship the creature rather than the creator. And the sun, of course, was created clearly in the Bible by God himself. And that's why it's beneficial for us. It's not that it has inherent qualities that it designed itself in order to do those sorts of things. But yeah, I can second Kirk's evaluation in regards to. I must admit, I did not have tears this morning, but I did not have daughters. So it may be a little different. He's got 4 daughters, and I just had 4 sons. But nonetheless, it is nice to see family coming together. My sister is here today from Tennessee, that was sitting next to me. Janice, and we also have my older brother who has a Catholic family. They're all coming later on this afternoon, and they're even, we mentioned we're going to have a dinner. It's the last time that the families will be separated. The Kruger family is going to have their relatives over for their house for dinner, and we're going to have them over at Edward and Linda's, which is our side of the family's house. But Jason, their oldest boy, said, yeah, we're going to come for the after Mass dinner. And so they only know about Mass. They don't see it as church per se. But this is the first wedding, even though it's our 4th son, the first wedding that they've come to because it's on the West Coast. They live in Seattle, Washington. And all the others were east of the Mississippi, by far, and it was a little too far for that family to come. And so we're praying that all are impressed and that God's name be glorified as these two families unite. So our lesson today, the memory verse, is something that's the overarching part of things. And this memory verse is a text that often our chaplain in the Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program gives as the last text before they go into reentry. So this is Monday morning, it's graduation. They have not only learned these principles, they've incorporated the principles, they see the marked change in their life that's occurred. They're pretty excited. Graduation day is coming. And so then he breaks down this verse for them. And it's 2 Timothy. It's one of the last words that Paul wrote. The last book that he wrote was 2 Timothy. And this was just days before, maybe even minutes before his execution at the hand of Nero. And so let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. And it says, I know we may have some roving microphones at some point, and it'd be good. We want this not to be a monologue, but also a dialogue. And so thank you for those that are roaming the microphones. And I'll read it to start out with, since you guys aren't prepared, but other texts, feel free to volunteer and read. For God gave us a spirit, not of what? Fear. So the first thing he says, of course, God is giving us this spirit, and yet this is in the setting of the lesson. The lesson is about Bible prophecy. And the lesson author, I actually had the opportunity to hear the lesson author comment about this lesson. The lesson author is Sean Boonstra. He was director of the Voice of Prophecy at the time. Now he's an assistant editor of the Adventist Review. He's just recently taken that job. But Sean Boonstra was not raised Seventh-day Adventist. And he said, I haven't done a study, but here's what I've noticed in particular. He said, people that are raised Adventists, when they study Bible prophecy, one of our texts, for instance, is there's going to be a time of trouble such as there never was. That those that come into the church, like him, that weren't raised Seventh-day Adventist, they're not so fearful. Prophecy is something that's positive for them. But those that are raised in the church, it's like, don't talk about it. This is fear. Why do you think that might be? And now, once again, it's not a statistically validated study, but it's based on his own experience. He's an evangelist. He's bringing people in. And he's also being in churches where people are at. Why might that tendency be present? Anyone want to give a stab at that? All right, no hands going up. So I'll just tell you what he said, what his opinion is. He said, those that are raised in the world recognize the world is a bad place. And so they're excited about coming in to God's way of doing things. Where those that are raised in the church, they're raised in a somewhat protective environment. They might have had a home that is heaven on earth. And so they're used to more positive things. And so one of the reasons why they have this reticence about Bible prophecy is, I kind of like this good protective life that I'm a part of, and I don't want to have to think about trouble, a time of trouble. So it seemed to make sense to me, those differences, and that's one of the advantages. One of the advantages I had was being raised by a father who was not raised Seventh-day Adventist. Now, I came along as child number 5. I talked about my brother's family. My brother was being raised, and so he was still of age when my father and mother became Seventh-day Adventists. So 3 of my siblings were raised, at least in part, non-SDA. And then my sister and I were raised SDA. They had already turned Seventh-day Adventists by the time we came about, and so we were very much involved in that. But my father would always talk about the way he thought things were when he was being raised, and the way he was taught, and now the way the Bible says it, and how the Bible makes so much more sense, and how it's logical, it's consistent, and it's beautiful, and it helps us to have a perspective that is truly wonderful. Our nurse, who is a recent convert from Adventism at the Nedley Clinic, she's not here today. I think their family is in Oregon. Christina Holliday, if you have a chance to meet her, a wonderful Christian woman and mother. But she was not raised at all Seventh-day Adventists, got involved in the world, all sorts of problems in the world, etc. And it was a colporteur who had left a book at her mother-in-law's house 18 years earlier called Bible Readings for the Home. And when she was over her mother's house, she saw that, and she said she had a lot of questions growing up, a lot of questions that could not be answered. And she picked up that Bible Readings for the Home, and every question that she had an answer from the Bible. And she said, this is just beautiful. All these things I've wondered about for years. The answer is right there. It makes sense. So she went through that whole Bible Readings for the Home, and in her heart became a Seventh-day Adventist before she knew what a Seventh-day Adventist was, just as a result of literature that was left by a canvasser to help answer those questions. So my dad would always, I thought every Seventh-day Adventist was growing up this way. My dad would always tell me about what was special about the biblical beliefs that only few understand, but the rest of the world is totally confused on, like he was confused before. So I would always have that. This is the way it was. For him, this is the way it is, and I felt so privileged to being raised with that truth of Seventh-day Adventism. I just thought, this is very special. I am very privileged to be able to learn all of this. And I was excited about it. And when I went to an Adventist school, I thought all of my friends would be excited about it as well. But I realized that many of them weren't. And it's like, don't you realize the truths that we've been given and how this makes consistent sense and how it affects our life? But they were majoring in minors and blowing up those minors as big majors if there was an issue at the school or whatever. And they would try to capitalize on this and criticize things. And I was up at the big picture because my father had helped teach me that way. And so one of the things in family units that's important for us is to teach these principles to our children and help them to realize why the world is such a terrible place. And it's a terrible place because they've been deceived by deceptions and they're living according to those deceptions. But we have a hand over here. Dr. Sabangan is with us today. By the way, it was great to have Adam back. Where is Adam?
He's somewhere.
He's somewhere, but Adam, we haven't heard Adam's piano for a while, but great to have him back, yes.
No, I was going to say, you're right. I think a lot of the Adventist kids that are growing up today, they have this protective barrier, and they just ease into life in so many ways. And the other aspect is they've heard it so many times, these fire and brimstone type of prophetic events that are coming. And so they get so used to it that it doesn't excite them anymore. Now, I grew up as a Catholic, and when I first heard about all these things, man, I was so excited. I was so on fire telling everybody that, hey, Christ is coming soon. You got to get ready. You got to get ready. And the people that first introduced me to Adventism became seemingly cold. They weren't like as, on fire as I was, when I first heard about this. But like you said, though, a lot of the kids that grow up in the church just don't have that fire, that burden to reach out to souls.
Mm-hmm. And they also can succumb to the perceptions. When you turn on Hollywood TV, it looks like the Hollywood actors are having a more enjoyable life than they are being raised in this environment. And it says, well, we're supposed to beware of Hollywood, but they look like they're having a great time. And they don't realize it. I mean, I've actually taken care of a lot of Hollywood actors. They're not having a great time. They're having all sorts of trouble. Their lives are terrible, but it's a marketing campaign. And they have to be deceptive in their whole demeanor in order to market themselves. Even in the sports world, it looks like, boy, these people are just having all sorts of great fun and happiness. And then they come to our program, and you realize they weren't even having fun and happiness when they were winning. And they had all sorts of issues in their life, and they didn't even want to be at the championship game because their wife had just kicked them out and hit them over the head and was on drugs and all of this sort of stuff. And it's like, I have to show up because of the contract, but then they have to act like it's such a great world. So that's part of the whole deception that a lot of Adventist young kids think they're shielded from. They have this idea they're being shielded because maybe life is going to be too good over there. The parents don't want them to experience good things. And they don't realize, no, the parents realize what this world is like. We're trying to shield them from getting involved in frontal lobe suppressants that are addictive, that will take them out permanently. Yes?
One thing that I noticed when I was growing up in the church, that a lot of my friends looked around and their parents were hypocrites. I mean, we had one guy who was, they were trying to strictly cause him to, be a Christian and Adventist. They were first time. But the mom was eating pork, was hiding it from the rest of the family, and yet the kids knew, and so I believe a lot of it has to do with hypocrisy as well. And so that's really a call for us parents as we're raising our children to try to focus on what are they really seeing. Are they seeing hypocrisy, or are they seeing the genuine?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And fortunately, my father was not a hypocrite. When he believed in something, he lived it and he talked it. And so I didn't see a two-sided aspect growing up, which helped me, obviously. That's another advantage tremendously. All right, so we're not through with this verse. God has not given a spirit not of fear, so we aren't to fear these things. In fact, often when, even the book of Daniel that we're going to study today, when the angel showed up to talk to Daniel, his first words were, "Fear not." And so we aren't to fear these things. We really ought to look at it like the greatest comeback in sports history. A team's going to get beat up pretty bad, but at the end, they're going to win. And when you're getting beat up pretty bad, and there's a come from behind victory, there's a joy and satisfaction that's even greater than it would be if you were winning all the time. And it's not that big a deal. And so Christ continues to say, if we are faithful, if we're strong in Him, we don't need to fear. So fear not. God has given us a spirit not of fear, but what does the rest of the verse say? But of power. Where does that power come from? It comes from God. He's willing to grant us that power, but He's not only willing to give us power, He can also give us what? What's the rest of the verse? Love. That word love is not the love of humanity for each other. Filial love. Today there's going to be a lot, this weekend, a lot of filial love with families coming together. It's probably why some of them aren't here for Sabbath school. They're enjoying each other's company so much last night and this morning that, it's all this family time together. That's the filial love. But this is what type of love? Agape love. What type of love is that? That has to come from God. It's self-sacrificing. And as fallen human beings, we have selfish love. We can have romantic love, even that can be selfish. The Greek word also has eros, which is erotic love. That can be selfish as well. But agape love is totally self-sacrificing. And by the way, when Justin and Carrie state their vows or say I do, they're actually going to be swearing to each other for life for self-sacrificing love. Because it says in sickness and in health, for richer, for what? Poorer. In other words, the typical wedding vow that most people remember taking, even though it's not what they take. But I've heard it, all the excuses why marriages break up. But the number one excuse is, well, didn't I take an oath that I will be with her until love shall last? That's not godly love. Godly love is unfailing love. It's unfailing love, and it is, on top of that, it's self-sacrificing love. So, and of course, that's vitally important for families. We mentioned this whole aspect of family units that God has created with humanity that he didn't necessarily have with the angelic community. He created them for a purpose. Our brains were created to be neuroplastic, to be able to be molded even in the way our parents want them to be molded in some respects, and expertise developed where he had created each of the angels in regards to their expertise. And of course, Lucifer had all the expertises per se in one being. Made him pretty proud when he compared himself to the rest of the angelic host. And pretty soon he thought he was smarter than Christ himself, and started to get jealous and all of those sorts of things. But with the neuroplasticity, human beings can be amazing as well, but they will be far more amazing if they are raised by self-sacrificing parents than by selfish parents. Because if they're raised by selfish parents, they're more likely to be neglected. They're far more likely to be abused. Not just likely, they will be neglected. They will be abused. Their parents might develop addictions that actually hurt their own children. And are not willing to give up those addictions. This is what the world is like. And this is one of the reasons why Christ was so opposed to casual sex. Casual consensual sex, by definition, is self-centered sex, where when you take that oath and commitment, this is an intimacy that is self-sacrificing. And the world has never seen self-sacrificing intimacy when they watch the internet or when they watch Hollywood movies. They've only seen the selfish aspect of things. And the intimacy that is selfless, based on Christ's way of what he designed humanity, is so much better than can be depicted by these Hollywood attempts at self-centered intimacy. So this is why we shouldn't even want to watch self-centered intimacy. It should be repulsive to us because it's not God's way. It's a deception. It's totally the wrong aspect. So he's going to give us power. He's going to give us his love, which is self-sacrificing. And what else is he going to give us? Some versions say a sound mind. What do some other versions say? Self-control. Self-control. Comprehensive self-control. Ellen White, if you want to know the text, I can give it to you, but Ellen White states that everyone who makes it eternally is going to be living by two principles. And this is everyone. They might not have been exposed to the seventh-day Sabbath. They might not have even been exposed to the health message. But the two principles that everyone that lives eternally and saved for eternal life will have self-sacrificing love, and they will have comprehensive self-control. Those are the two things. And if you're lacking in those two things, I would encourage you to get to know God better. When you get to know God better, He is willing to grant us exactly what Paul said in his last words. He will grant us a spirit not of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind, which is comprehensive self-control. And by the way, we can't have comprehensive self-control unless we're willing to put our all on the altar for Him. That's how He grants it to us. So if you have issues with self-control, you have a problem with self-centeredness in your life that you haven't given over to God yet. And so you need to put your all on the altar of sacrifice. And when we are willing to put everything on the altar to buy the pearl of great price, that pearl of great price is Christ's self-sacrificing love and comprehensive self-control. And even the secular scientists tell us that opens the door to the good life. When you have comprehensive self-control, you are going to experience the good life. When you have self-sacrificing love and empathy, you are going to experience the good life. And it's going to be far better than what Hollywood can even fake on all of their acting, or the sports heroes fake as well. They tell me when they come to this program that they've done a lot of faking. When they're losing a championship game, they can't even smile on the sidelines. They're not allowed. Because if the camera shows them smiling, the fans are going to say, I would know why we lost. He didn't take it seriously enough. And if you're winning, you've got to act like it's the best thing that's happened to you, even though you don't even want to be there, because it's that marketing deceptive campaign that is so prevalent in sports and in Hollywood today. So that's the background of our prophecies. Now, it actually asked us to go to Daniel chapter 2, but I want to do a little bit of forerunning and go to Daniel 1. It's actually Daniel 2 and 3 that the lesson emphasized. And so let's go to Daniel chapter 1 first as a foreground. This is one of the, Daniel is a book of prophecy, but it's a book of stories, particularly the first 6 chapters. And I think one of the, this is why you need to know your audience. If your audience doesn't know God well, it's usually not best to hit them with the prophecies of Revelation first, or even the prophecies of Daniel first, because they don't know how to contextualize that. They might be amazed. Daniel chapter 2, for instance, is amazing, because if you go to Turkey, and some of you, how many of you were on the Turkey tour that just ended? I know some of the people just came back. The Turkey tour people are all jet lagged. None of them are here today. But if you go on the Turkey tour, by the way, Turkey is the biggest museum in all the world. It's an outdoor museum, because that's where civilization restarted. You know, Noah's Ark is actually in Turkey. You can go there to the mountains of Ararat in that area and see where civilization began. And so with all of the Turkey aspect in regards to the history, going as far back as you can go in human history, you see very much alive the fact that Babylon ruled that area, that Persia ruled the area, and then Greece ruled the area, and then Rome ruled the area. And you can see all of those monuments in real time that were set up at different dates in regards to all of that. And it's huge. The difference between Greece and Rome, you know, sometimes people think, oh, that's not that big a deal. Maybe Daniel's just being narrow here. No, this was a huge deal. Not just Turkey, but the whole areas around were very much influenced by these world empires. But let's go to Daniel chapter 1. Every chapter in Daniel starts out with a tremendous disappointment, some pretty fearful things, but it ends with an appointment and something that's just wonderful and great. But there's a transition that occurs from the disappointment to the appointment. When we look at the first 7 chapters of Daniel, that's pretty fearful stuff. It was pretty bad stuff. A king full of rage, mental health issues, comes in, and God's people are not protected from him. By the way, why weren't they protected? I hear words. Because of their sins? Was it just because of their sins? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God?
They had rejected him by preferring the gods of the surrounding nations.
Yeah, so it wasn't just sin and then recognizing their sin and repenting and getting back on course. They were in rebellion. And they were in rebellion even with their king. And interestingly, nationalism was one of the reasons why Judaism was taken over. They had a nationalistic spirit. And the king of Israel was being counseled by his counselors to stand up to Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. And Jeremiah, the true prophet, says, don't say those words to him. Actually enter into an agreement. Tell him that you'll be submissive to him. Tell him that you'll do those sorts of things. And Jeremiah was seen as a traitor to Israel. And Jeremiah knew what was going to happen if they didn't follow God's advice. And instead of being submissive, he decided that he was going to go with his counselors and be nationalistic, and God will not allow this to happen. He'll protect us. And God did not protect, as he said he would not. And so the whole nation was, if you read the 7 verses there of Daniel 1, that's the consequence. While they're taken into captivity, their best people are taken over. Well, I probably gave it away. Where does it go from disappointment to appointment? What's the transition? Anyone want to know what verse it is? Can you find it there? Yeah, someone want to read verse 8 for us? Can anyone read verse 8? Or Gabe said verse 8, I think. Are you the one that said it? Okay, so give the microphone to Gabe here, and he will read verse 8.
But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Okay, so the King James says Daniel purposed in his heart. The ESV that I have says Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself. This was not just a split decision. This was something that he spent some time thinking about. And he thought, I'm over here in Babylon. I'm being offered what they're telling me, what their science is telling me is the best food. But I know God told us to eat differently. And I'm going to go with the science of the Bible and not the science of the world. And so he purposed in his heart. The actual Aramaic, according to Aramaic scholars, is he gave his heart to God. He gave it all over to God. And notice what happened. Verse 9. I don't know who has the microphone, who can read verse 9.
Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs.
Okay. So when you're given unmerited favor, what's another word for that? Grace. Daniel stepped out in faith to follow God's plan, and God poured grace into his life. And how are we saved? We are saved by grace through faith. So the salvational message is right there in Daniel 1. And this is a great chapter. In fact, the entire book is a great chapter to read after people have been introduced and starting embracing the health message. When they come here and start making changes in their health, because this is talking about changes in diet, changes in health, and they step out and follow God's plan, they will notice themselves how the Lord starts pouring grace into their life. Now, one of the reasons for the grace, of course, is the fact that Daniel had self-sacrificing love even for the prince of the eunuchs. And when you have self-sacrificing love and you get to know people well, they start to have an affinity towards you often. And so that affinity was manifest so that we won't go into it, but he was fearful. Talk about fear. This guy was fearful to allow Daniel to eat his own diet. He said, what's going to happen when the king finds out and then you guys aren't doing as well? Science says that you should eat this way. Our king is all about science, and he knows what's best, and this is not going to go well. And then Daniel proposed the first prospective epidemiological clinical trial in human history. Sometimes I run across doctors. I did in Ireland the other day. I was speaking at a secular university in Ireland, and they had never considered the fact that we wouldn't have clinical trials without Daniel. It's the Bible that started them out. It's the Bible that actually gave true science. And so prior to that, in fact, we always see good science coming out of Bible study. Newton, the laws of physics, wrote more about Daniel than he did. There's a whole book written on that. These are people that try to separate science from the Bible. They end up the way Harvard is today. That's what Harvard didn't start out that way. It was all about being unapologetically biblical and uncompromisingly scientific. And the only way you can be uncompromisingly scientific is to be unapologetically biblical. And now they're preaching science that's so laughable, it's ridiculous. But it's pontificating by PhDs that are majoring in minors and don't even know how to do true science. It's become the laughing stock of certain people in the nation who understand common sense. So government funds are even being withdrawn from Harvard over their lack of common sense in regards to their science. But it wouldn't be that way if they would combine these two together. So Daniel proposed this as a test. Said, okay, let's do a test. And he trusted God's science that he knew what the outcome was going to be. And the outcome showed they were healthier, they looked better, they were better. And so now Melzar had an excuse. We actually did a test. We found out Daniel's diet is actually better, at least for them. The comparison group were the Jews. It was the children of their sort, so they tried to use the same ethnic group as well. That's part of good science, is to narrow it down and then compare that. And then we see the great things that happen, not only to their bodies, but their brains. And the longevity. Daniel lasted all the way through Persia in regards to a long life. And then we get to chapter 2. What changes the disappointment of chapter 2 into an appointment? Can anyone find that verse? look through Daniel 2. We have this dream. Well, 11 looks pretty fatalistic. No one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. You can imagine how Nebuchadnezzar felt like he was double-crossed. You know, I know there's times when Donald Trump feels like that he was double-crossed by those that were close to him, and probably every president goes through that. But these people were told that they had communion with the gods, and so they would help advise him. And then all of a sudden, they actually admit under duress that, I'm sorry, only God can do this, and his dwelling is not with flesh. So that's pretty disappointing, because not only are they going to die, Daniel and his 3 friends are going to die. All of these people associated with the counselor and educational side are in trouble. And so where does it turn around? Okay, let's see. Someone says verse 14. Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. So yeah, it started there, but that's not what actually produced the wonderful miracle that changed it from disappointment to appointment. Someone says 18. Verse 19. The mystery was revealed. But yeah, I think 18 is good as well. What was it revealed in response to? It was in response to prayer. So we are saved by grace through faith, but we maintain that relationship through communion with God, prayer. And prayer can change the world. The effectual, fervent prayer of a what? Of a righteous man availeth much. God listens to our prayers when with all sincerity we pour them forth. And so Daniel and his 3 friends have a prayer meeting. They don't sleep that night. They have a prayer meeting. They have an all-night prayer vigil. And then Daniel is told not only the dream, but the interpretation. And it's very clear Daniel was written far before Persia took over, and before Greece and before Rome. But this is so solid. This dream is so solid, it's very true even to this day, including the feat of iron and clay. It's just amazing to me. Weak nations next to strong nations, and they don't mix. They don't mix. The lesson author brought out the fact that there was all sorts of attempts to get Europe united by intermarrying. You know, they needed to marry the Prince of Spain or the Prince of Saxony and all of this in order to be able to get Europe united, get these monarchs to intermarry, and then we can have one. And they tried all that, and even that didn't work. And so Europe remains divided to this day. And we just got through speaking at Ireland, as I mentioned. And the Irish, do not clear. You don't call them a Brit. Yeah, you don't go, there's all sorts of issues there. And the other thing I found out about the Irish, you don't quote the Bible to them coming up to try to win them, because they have seen false religion on full display. Their reaction is against false religion. It's against Catholicism. It's against apostate Protestantism. And you come in with religion, and they will not listen. You come in with good science that's logical, and they will listen. And then, when they're listening, you can tell them about Daniel, and then they'll listen to you. Because they realize you're not like the rest of those manipulators out there. False religion is manipulative. We should have a reaction against false religion. We shouldn't be, defensive when people start criticizing the religions of Europe that brought them to their knees. These were religions that were trouble. and were not part of self-sacrificing love and self-control. They were the opposite of that, but they were in the midst of trying to control the human subjects. And then we get to chapter 3. Chapter 3, we see Nebuchadnezzar's interpretation of the dream. What was his interpretation? We're going to make this all Babylon, all the way through the earth's history. It is going to be Babylon, Babylon, Babylon. It's going to be all the principles that I have set up. We are so far superior to any other form of government that this whole idea that we're going to be taken over by a weaker group of people, like silver is to gold, that's ridiculous. And we need the entire world empire to understand this. So let's bring them together. And the phrase that's repeated a lot during this disappointing part of Daniel chapter 3, what is the phrase that's repeated a lot? Someone said it back there. Give him the microphone. Who spoke? All right, yes. Our Girls Academy Dean.
That I have set up.
Yes, the setup. And so they continue to talk about the setup. And by the way, when you're being manipulated by governments that are not true forms of God's government, it's a setup. It is manipulative. And what did he use to set up the people to bow down? Yeah, he not only used gold, this whole image of gold, but he also used what? Music. Now, what kind of music? It says all kinds of music. Now, some of you might be aware, but I think it's on Monday that Andres Mendoza packs up his last bag and moves to Shenandoah Valley Academy to be their academy instructor in music. And Shenandoah Valley Academy's instructor was known as very good, and he was recruited by Wesley Taylor, a Weimar graduate, to go to Andrews University and teach in that music department. So that was the vacancy. And so we have an opening here. And we have 4 strong candidates that have applied for this position. And they are very good candidates. But one of the candidates, extremely skilled in music, extremely, what should we say? I would imagine that this person would really grow the department. Articulate, great teacher, all of those things. One of the things she put on her resume is, I enjoy and teach all kinds of music. So you can imagine that we're narrowing the list down. All kinds of music can be manipulative. And some of that music's been shown to suppress the frontal lobe. It can also increase rebellion after it's listened to. And so part of the setup was having these all kinds of music. But then there was also the setup of fear. Fear was part of this. And by the way, why did they have this fiery furnace out in the desert? Has anyone tried to figure that out? All right, we have a hand over here.
It was designed to make the bricks that they made with all their buildings.
Yes, and I would imagine, in order to form an image of gold, you've got to put gold tried in the what? In order for gold to do what you want it to do, it has to be heated up. It has to be super hot. And so they had that furnace to make that image of gold. And Nebuchadnezzar thought, all right, we've got the furnace. That ought to put fear. And if anyone tries to change this to silver, they're going to know what's going to happen to them. And so we'll just let them know ahead of time. And so what type of decree was given if they did not bow down and worship the gods of Babylon? It was death. Death over what you're worshiping, who you're worshiping. So where did it turn from disappointment to appointment in chapter 3? And we want to find those verses. Yes, we have a hand in the back. Our new registrar that just graduated.
Would it be verse 25 when he sees the fourth man in the fire?
Okay, let's go to verse 25. Yes, well, that's certainly an example of where it turned from disappointment to appointment. But there is a spiritual key before that. All right, we have the girls' dean again.
17 and 18.
Okay. Go ahead and read it.
Well, I can start at 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up.
All right. Despite the setup, we're not doing it. We are not doing it. And where did they get that from? Where did they get the idea that they could be saved from this? You know, the book of Psalms had already been written. And I'm sure, you know, they actually kind of quote out of Psalms 91 there. It's kind of a paraphrase of Psalm 91. So they're quoting the promises of God to Nebuchadnezzar. And when a manipulative king gets truth told to him by his subjects, what do you think his response to that is? The very next verse says he was not only just filled with anger, he was filled with what? He was filled with rage. One of the things I've noticed is when people don't have truth on their side, to make a point, they amplify their emotions to try to manipulate further. When you have truth on your side, you can just be calmly presenting the truth. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not yelling at Nebuchadnezzar. They were just stating truths from the Word of God. But the response was rage. And Nebuchadnezzar thought there was no chance for them. This had made this image of gold. It's going to evaporate them. And so he found the strongest men just in case they could get loose, because he knew these guys were physically fit. He knew they were on a good diet. He knew they had endurance. These guys could get away. They're pretty amazing guys, but they have just offended me in front of all of this group. And so he found the strongest ones, and what happened to the strong? They died from the heat. They were actually incinerated. But then those 3 Hebrews added a 4th. And that 4th was a part of their life. They had self-sacrificed for him, and he showed up for them. And God will not forget his own. God will, even under the most trying circumstances, he will not forget his own. And so we should realize that if we have that type of relationship with the Lord, he's not going to forget us. Even though it might be a time of trouble, such as there never was since there was a nation, it'll actually be for us in the end. You know, one of the things I've thought about, the people that make it through in the time of the end, we are told that those are the people that will, along with others, unique human beings that were similar, that died before us, will make up the 144,000. That 144,000 is going to be, according to the book of Revelation, the judges of the universe. That means we will be part of the Supreme Court of the universe. In order to be a good judge, you have to know what bad judgment's like. And you have to see how bad judgment affected you sometimes. And so this whole trial that we're going through, it's for not only our elevation, but also the elevation of the universe. And we've been so contaminated by sin in this generation. We've been so contaminated by sin that if he just lets us in now without those trials, we're not going to be ready for being a Supreme Court justice of the universe. We're going to still think that there are some bad things down here that might not be so bad. And we need to understand how bad it all is apart from God. And so only a time of trouble such as there never has been since there was a nation will help us to see clearly God's plan versus the devil's plan. And we will have a judgment that is superior to even the other created beings who have never fallen, because we've experienced it ourselves. So the lesson went into more than just Daniel 2 and 3. Let's see if I can pull it up here. By the way, I would encourage you all, one of the best apps that you can download is the Sabbath School app. So this is worthwhile screen time. So the Sabbath School app will have the entire week's lesson, and you can just click on a text. You can immediately see it. It's very efficient. But in addition to that, you can get Ellen White's writings about that particular aspect of the chapter. And what I've noticed is, even though you have a great writer like Sean Boonstra, Ellen White actually says it even better. It's like, wow, it's pretty amazing. And you can actually press the little headphone button. You can be out exercising, and you can hear the lesson. All the text will be read, and then the Ellen White quotes will come up afterwards, and you'll be able to hear the Ellen White quotes. It might take 15 or 20 minutes to go through one day's lesson, but you're out there in nature, and if there's nothing to distract you, it's a great way to start your day. And that's how Eric and I start most of our days, doing that. And then you can also get, how I got Sean Boonstra's commentary is this aspect of video. So there's 5 different teachers of the lesson, if you want to learn more about it. And one of the teachers is Mark Finley. One of the teachers is from It Is Written. And It Is Written actually interviewed Sean Boonstra. You have Hope Sabbath School, and you also have the son-in-law of Ted Wilson, Cameron DeVasher, and Mark Howard. They do one as well. And I think there's even more. So you have, whichever group you want to be able to understand more of. If you want to do that, it's there. And so, and if I do miss it, since it recognizes that I'm doing this on a consistent basis, if I haven't done my lesson by 8 a.m. in the morning, I get a little push notification. Time to study your Sabbath School, Dr. Nedley. And so there's that reminder. It doesn't take long to download the app. Make sure it's the General Conference app. The General Conference actually puts this together for us. But after Daniel 3, so Tuesday was Daniel 3. I think we're close to the end of this lesson. but we have early church persecution. Acts 12, verses 1 through 17. Thank you very much. I was looking for that in my pocket, and I didn't have it. And we have females that notice details up front. I thank God for a female I have that notices details like that, so I don't embarrass myself 24/7. Acts chapter 12 tells us about a situation that looked pretty grim. Peter is now taken to prison, and they have the most secure aspect, even more secure than what they have today, because it would be seen as cruel and unusual punishment, even for the workers to have to be chained to a prisoner. But they've got 2 security guards chained to a prisoner, and they've got all sorts of doors that are locked between, and all of these things watching over Peter. And the church is praying for Peter. And what is Peter doing? He doesn't have a spirit of what? He doesn't have a spirit of fear. He's got that agape love and self-control. And he's sleeping so deep that the angel has to shake him to wake him up. And then amazing things start to happen. So amazing that Peter thinks this has got to be a dream. This can't be real. Until he's out there on the street called, well, I don't know. That wasn't straight, was it? It was, in fact, do you know where they were meeting at? They were meeting at the Apostle John's mother's house, it says. And so James and John, mother, and by the way, James had already been killed. So her other son had already been killed, and now we have Peter. And Peter shows up knocking at the door, and Rhoda answers and shocked to see him and closes the door and makes an announcement, and they think she's mad, and then Peter has to keep knocking. And then Peter encourages them. And then I thought Peter would want to stay there, but he didn't. He had another place to stay. And he went over and stayed that other place. And Peter was able to be a great apostle for God for years to come until he died the way Christ said he would die. It was not time for him to die. There is a time for even great human beings to die. As Ecclesiastes says, there is a time to die. But if we are in God and following his will, we won't die until it's time for us to die, and we can rest assured that we can sleep well even the night before our death, because it's time. And then Thursday goes into Revelation 13, the parallels between Daniel 3 and Revelation 13. But before it does those parallels, it actually talks about, and in fact, let's go to Revelation 13. Revelation 13 actually has the encouragement by the devil to break all 4 of the first commandments. So, worshiping the dragon, verse 4. We are to worship God. We're to have no other gods before him. That's chapter 1. And then chapter 2, that's commandment 1. Commandment 2 is about the image. And we see this thing about the image. And then we see this thing about the number of his name. And speaking about his name, that's the 3rd commandment. So when we see all those, it should be pretty much a no-brainer what's coming next. And that's the 4th commandment. And so that's being able to interpret Revelation 13 in 4 easy steps, going through the numbers of the commandments. And so, but what it pointed out in the lesson, and I hadn't seen it from this perspective before, is that Christ was also sought to be killed over the Sabbath. Does anyone remember that? Why were they seeking to kill Christ about the Sabbath? Because he healed on the Sabbath. I heard over here because they thought he was breaking the Sabbath. Why did they think he was breaking the Sabbath? Was there anything in the Bible? What were you going to say? He wasn't following their laws. There is nothing in the Bible against healing on the Sabbath. You can't find it anywhere. But they had made a law. They had made a law, and you better keep their law. You better keep their law. And so Christ did nothing. In fact, he even demonstrated it with his withered hand. He gave them an example. Which of you that found a sheep in the ditch, if it was your sheep, would not get that sheep out even on the Sabbath? So is it lawful for us to heal on the Sabbath? In other words, this was the only time he and this withered man were going to be together. Christ was a busy man. And it happened to be on the Sabbath. And he knew that he was breaking their law, but he wasn't breaking God's law. And he kept God's law of the Sabbath. And he put his own life at stake over healing this withered man. And God had to actually guide him and be careful. There was another Sabbath miracle that was towards the end of his life, where he went into the pool of Bethesda. And that pool of Bethesda had a lot of sick people in it. He could have healed them all, but God wanted him to heal just one of those people. And he went in and healed one. And even that became a big deal, huge deal. And we're told that had he healed all of them, his life would have ended prematurely. It wasn't time for him because there would have been so much anger over him healing all. But he got to one, and they still were very angry about that. And so that tells us that it's not new to have death decrees over the Sabbath. There's a lot of Adventists today that say, wait a minute, this is not going to happen, and we don't even see this happening. This is kind of far-fetched, all of this. It's not going to be far-fetched. It's going to be real, and it's going to be over the central part of the commandments of God. Are we willing to keep those commandments as Daniel was willing to keep the commandments about health in the sixth commandment? And are we willing to live a life of self-sacrifice and self-control? Was that the second bell? It was the second bell. All right, I'm done. And let's pray before we close. Father in heaven, we thank you that even at looking at the prophecies of the future, you have instructed us that you can grant us a spirit not of fear, but of power and of self-sacrificing love and of a sound mind with comprehensive self-control. We pray that we may trust you and your plan for us fully. Help us to recognize that is the best way to live. And help us to have more keen discernment about the deceptions of this world and the system that Satan and his followers have set up to rebel against you, which is really rebelling against themselves. And help us to be able to call them out of Babylon to serve you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.